everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here today. This is Paul Taubman with 9.connects. You are in the right place if you are here for creating components in Altium 365 Concord Pro that won't bite back. So we have quite a few things to show you here today, so we're going to get right into it. Just two housekeeping notes very quickly. It comes to about questions. We should have some time for questions at the end today. So please feel free to write those into the question panel in your GoToMeeting panel. Just one thing is that if you could be specific about it, I'd appreciate it. It's always hard to answer a question if someone says, what do you mean by that? Because then we have to respond by saying, well, what do you mean by that? And so if you can be very specific about your question, I'd appreciate it. So, and I will definitely take a look at these. If we can't get through all the questions, we'll certainly put together a Q&A sheet afterwards. And I suspect there'll be some questions here today. So with that being said, let me talk about our objectives for today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the stage for you. There are things that we need to know and we need to remember. If I just go into it today, and I thought about doing this, just going in and creating a component for you and then kind of seeing what the results of it were, then I realized I was leaving a lot out of it. And we need to talk about some things that have to be already in place or things that we need to remember in order to make the component successful. Then we will create a component, and I'll make it rather quickly. You'll be surprised at how easy and how quick I can make a component. But we're also going to see what I did wrong in creating that component. So the impact of this creation. And lastly, we'll go through the proper creation of a component. What you're going to see here, I'll just give you a little hint, is that the creation, the proper creation, they're not too far off. In fact, it's the same procedure in a sense. It's just the order of operation and knowing what happens when you do certain things. So we'll go through that here today. So with that being said, I do want to start off with a polling question because I'm very curious to know about the audience I've got here today. So if you can take a moment and fill out that poll, I'd really appreciate it. I thought I'd put it in here. Let me see if I got it. There we go. So are you using Concord Pro, Altium 365, or Altium 365 Pro? I'd just like to know where you guys are with it. So I think we've now closed the poll at this time. So let's take a look. 14% of you guys are not using it, purchasing it, but have a interest in it. Okay, so for those here, please ask as many questions as you think, because obviously this is an investment of your time and your resources. I know a good portion of you, 1/5 of you, trying to get started in it. So I think this will be a good thing for you to definitely take a look at. And of course, I'm curious, but to see what your take is on it. I think there's something in this for you as well. Even though this is almost half of the group that's here, there's going to be information that you may say, oh, now I see why I'm not doing this right, or I see why my colleagues are having a problem with this. So I'm glad that you're here as well. And of course, for the curiosity factor, just to see what it's all about. So everybody certainly is welcome here. So now that I have a good feel about the audience I've got here today, the first thing I'm going to talk about, which I hemmed and hawed about it, but I think it's really important for us to talk about it for a moment because it does play a big role in all of this. What's the difference between Altium 365 and Concord Pro? Well, they're effectively the same product. Really, the only difference between the two, and they are the same code base. Okay, that's the big thing. So if you see it in Altium Designer, unless you know to look for certain icons, you may not even know if you're looking at a Concord Pro server or if you're looking at the Altium 365 server. The difference is that Concord Pro is hosted on a company server. So you download it, you put it on your company server, your IT folks take care of it. And of course, this is useful for those who don't want their stuff on the cloud or they have reasons to keep it within the organization. The other one is that Altium 365 is hosted through Altium's AWS server. So as a matter of fact, by default, you already get Altium 365 by the mere fact that you purchased Altium, you have a subscription. So when you purchased Altium, you pay for the subscription, that gives you access to pretty much a year's worth of updates for Altium Designer, which is the tool we use to design in. And then of course, they give you access to Altium 365, which is hosted on their server as well. And what you're seeing here today is what you can do with Altium 365, along with Concord Pro. Now, one of the things about Concord Pro is that the Altium 365 Pro is the same as Concord Pro. So there's actually two different Altium 365s. There's the one that you get automatically, and there's one that's the Pro, and I'll talk about the differences of those in just a minute. But for our purpose of comparing Altium 365 and Concord Pro, they're the same thing for the most part when it comes to library capabilities. There are certain things you can do in Pro that you can't do in Concord Pro simply because Altium 365 is on the cloud. And because it's on the cloud, you have some collaboration capabilities that go along with it. That here in Concord Pro, you're isolated, so you don't get those capabilities. Okay. So what's the difference between Altium 365 and the Pro version of it? Well, there's actually quite a few things. And if you want to see the full list, then take a look at altium.com/subscription/plans. Okay. And there's a big list. I'll show you all the things you get with the Pro version. It's a little extra money above what you get for free, well, I should say for free, what you get with your normal subscription. The thing we're most interested in is one of those in the chart. It's called a managed component, and I call it a listing here. But what does the managed component have? Well, it's got life cycle schemes. Oops, I think I spelled that wrong there. It has component templates. So let me take a step back. So what's a life cycle scheme? It's basically what's the status of the file. So in Concord Pro or Altium 365 Pro, you can tell, is that a new file? Is it one that can be used in a production design? Is it one that's being obsoleted? You can set up that lifecycle scheme as you see fit, and you can assign it to a file, any type of file, whether it's a component file or a project file, and anything in between. And then there's also component templates, and component templates are extremely useful. That's for consistency, though. I can explain a way of getting around that if you just use Altium 365. And then there is something called a revision scheme. So yes, there is revision control in Altium 365, but in 365 Pro, you can set up like different levels of revision scheme if you wish to do so. So those are the key things that I think are different. And the only reason I bring this up is because you may look at my screen saying, well, I don't have that on my screen. How come he's got that? It's probably because you may just be using Altium 365 and I'm using the Pro edition. And so as a matter of fact, I should mention that for today's webinar, I am using Altium 365 Pro. I'm not using Concord Pro for this, but it'll work perfectly fine in Concord Pro. So with that being said, of course, if there's questions about that, feel free to put those in the questions and I'll take a look at those afterwards. As I mentioned early on, we got to also talk about other things to remind ourselves about before we just jump into creating components. One of them is revision control. Everything we're doing here is under revision control. And this creates a very different environment that trips people up, right? So Concord Pro, Altium 365, call it, whatever product you're using, that they all use a revision-based file system. And why does this trip people up? Well, the big reason is because we can't just delete things or even stomp on them. So think for a moment, if you're doing something in Microsoft Word and you're typing along and you've already created this file and you make an update to it and you press save, what do? You stomp on the old file. And for the most part, you could care less about it, right? It's like, well, to me, I'm working on one file and the latest and greatest is the most important to me. But in a revision-based system, we don't really get to delete. Now we can delete, but if we need to delete, we need to delete it because there's something that's not right with it and we need to address it as quickly as possible. The longer it stays in the system, the harder it is for us to delete it or even try to somehow resurrect the situation that we may have gotten ourselves into. Now, in the past year, Altium's added more deleting capabilities to Concord Pro and Altium 365. So in the past, if you deleted something, if it even allowed you to delete it, then it was gone. Whereas now they kind of have like a trash bin that allows the administrators to go in there and to resurrect components if they have been, or any type of file, I should say, not just components. I'm always thinking from the component end, but any file that has been deleted, you can go into the basically the trash bin and pull it out and reinstate it now. And that's only been really available for the last year. But generally speaking, we don't want to delete things. And if we are deleting them, there should be a very specific reason to do so. And when we do it, it's probably something we want to pick up as fast as we can. Because in a revision control system, especially in Altium, these files are not individual files that sit on their own. They usually link to each other, right? So symbols and footprints, as you're going to see today, link to a component file. And that component file is ultimately going to be used in a project. So there's a link to the project. So we start building this web of files. And as a result, we really can't delete things because they're associated to each other. So changes to a file results in a revision change. So what do we mean by this is that if I go into a file, and I'll show this here in a few minutes, if I go into a file and I say edit, I'm not really editing that file. What it's doing is it's taking a capture of the existing file, allowing me to make changes to it, and when I save it, it comes out as a new revision of that file. The old revision of that file is still there. So that's something that we have to get our heads wrapped around, because a lot of us don't work in this type of environment. We work in an environment where we stomp on the old file, and that's not the case here. So each file is tagged with, and these are things that are permanent once we save it to the server, what they call a unique ID or an HR ID. So last week I had to look up something because I kept on getting this HR ID error, and what that means is human readable ID, which is just what we've always called the unique ID. You also have the lifecycle status. Again, this is for Concord Pro or Altium 365 Pro. And you also have a revision scheme that's associated to it as well. Once this gets saved to the server, these things cannot be changed. And there can be some issues with this, because for some reason, if you pick up on the wrong lifecycle status or scheme, or the wrong revision scheme, unless you fix that immediately, well, that part is always going to, or that file is always going to have these things associated with it, and that becomes problematic later on if you're trying to clean things up. And we've had customers saying like, hey, we need to clean these things up. Our files over here, some of them are pointing to this life cycle. These are passing to these newer components are pointing to this life cycle status. And how do we clean this up? And the answer is we really can't, because even if we bump the revisions on these files, we can't change the schemes that were initially associated to the files from the very beginning. So this is why it's really important that we get these right the first time. Now, the other assumption I have to make is that the admins have already set this up, that you already have some type of file structure here, so that they probably have a series of category folders or files. So when I say folders or folders or directories, I'm really talking about the same thing. So in each one of these folders, there are the components for this type of category. There's also these models as well. So we'll talk about schematic centric versus component centric things in a moment here, but for a directory point of view and from all the configuration point of view, I'm assuming that you've set this up already. And this is really important you do this, right? So your administrators have set this up, and now you're probably saying, well, I'm the administrator, I haven't set this up. So bear with me for a moment, all right? We'll give you a little bit of details where you can look to find some more information about this. But your revision scheme needs to be set up, the lifecycle scheme needs to be set up, and the folders for the libraries need to be set up. Your component folders, your symbol and footprint folders, all this stuff needs to be set up before you even start making components. Now, yes, you can immediately make components the minute you gain access to Altium 365, or the moment you install Concord Pro in, you can certainly create components, but you're now at the mercy of the defaults that Altium has already set up for you. And in many cases, those probably won't be the ones that you and your company want to use. So I'm going to jump out of here for just a moment and give you some recommendations. So if you're looking to say, well, how do I set this up? Let me kind of point you to a couple of things. I'm going to bring up let's bring this up over here. This is the 9.connect's website. About a year ago, we did a webinar on the 6 considerations for Altium 365 or Concord Pro setup. In fact, yeah, it's back in March of 2021. And we talk about the 6 things you need to address before you start making components or bringing files into these products: revision schemes, lifecycle schemes, folder structures, unique IDs, component types, and permissions. Those are the things that you'd want to set up. And this webinar goes through each one of these things briefly. Another area that you can look at, and by the way, to get to this, go into knowledge. You would go into our webinar series. This will bring up this page here. Then go to Altium Designer Related, and then you can click on this over here once you expand out the menu. So the other area you can look at, and this is more in a written form, is we have this thing called avoiding the gotchas. So where do we get to this one? If you go into our engineering services and you go into Concord Pro Altium 365 setup, over here on the left side under component management, you have Concord Pro A365 setup, and then you can do avoiding gotchas. So we go into a little more detail here. And a lot of it's going to be crossed over to the webinar, but we go into other details that the webinar may have not necessarily covered. And we also give you a little introductory video here that's hopefully will entertain you. But these are the things that you want to look at. So hopefully giving you a couple of places that you look for the configuration setup. right? So just want to throw that at you. But for our purposes today in this webinar, I'm going to assume you already have this set up, okay? And you're still going to see that there are going to be issues even if it is set up properly. All right, let me get back to my slides here for a moment. And we're going to get, by the way, I'm just going to show a few more slides, and then we're going to get into Altium 365. Okay. And let's go to the next one. So the next one, I have an interesting question to ask you. It's a polling question. And the reason I'm bringing this one up is because what I'm about to talk about is why most people have problems maintaining their libraries in these products. So the question I'm going to bring up to you over here is, when you, I'm talking about you, the person, first started using Altium Designer, I'd like to know about the libraries. Did you create your own? Did the company supply them? Did you use a third party? Or if you just happen to be here today, you're just, hey, look, I'm a program manager. I don't use Altium, but my team does, and I'm kind of curious to know what's going on. So if you can pick one of those, I'd appreciate it. I suspect I know what the answer is, but maybe you guys, let's see what the numbers look like. Okay, so we've closed it. So 3/4 of you created your own libraries, and that doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, that number is kind of lower. I thought it'd be actually even higher than that. Most of you probably created your own libraries because you needed to get your job done. You got Altium Designer, you opened it up, and you started creating designs. And in some cases, you may have been trained on it. And if you were trained on it, you're trained on a certain way to use libraries. And so that's what brings us over here to one of the reasons why people struggle with Altium 365 and Concord Pro, and that is because of library types. We've talked about these in prior webinars, but I think it's important for us to go to this again because you can see where the problems start coming in if your mindset is based on what's called a symbol-centric library. So for most of us, the 75% of us, including myself, when we first learned Altium Designer, we wanted to create a design, and we realized you can't get very far in Altium Designer unless you got a library. Now, Altium does provide libraries, and back then, when I started using this back in 2007, they only had 100,000 components. There's a billion components on the market, so obviously, I was gonna have to create my own components. So how do you do that in Altium? Well, let me bail out here, and let's take a look at a project that used the symbol-centric library. There's a project over here. Here's its library. Let's bring up the list. All right. So here are all these components that were created for this particular project. And how did I create this library to begin with? Well, most of us would go to File, New. We go to Library, and we'd say Schematic Library. What you may find interesting about this is there's nothing that says Component Library. And that was done on purpose because the original founder of Altium, Nick Martin, 20 years ago, when he first really started putting together Altium Designer, says, I don't want any more files necessary than I need to, because in most EDA tools, you have a component library, and then that component file or component definition file, and that one points to a symbol, and that also points to a footprint. And in some cases, in some tools, and not to pick on Allegro, but Allegro is an example of this, you further go down the footprints, and you actually have to have another library for the geometry, for the pad geometries. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I want to keep this as simple as possible. So he eliminated the whole idea of a component library. He says, I'm going to let the schematic library be the definition of the component. And that's exactly what you see over here. So let's pick something a little more exciting. Okay. Well, I don't know about that, but that's okay. Let's just pick this. It doesn't matter because in the end, they all follow the same format. We go in here and we open up a schematic library. This is, again, a symbol-centric library. And what do? We create a graphic, we draw a graphic in here, or we copy one from another one, and then we define it here on the properties. The component is defined by this. The information I put in here is used for a bill of materials. And the same thing with the footprint. I can link in a footprint from another library, they call it the footprint library, and I can link this in here as well. And that's what you're seeing for each and every single one of them. And that's what most of us have been taught in, or when I say taught, self-taught. And this is the way we normally proceed with these libraries. So what's the issue? Well, the issue is that Concord Pro and pretty much every other database library out there doesn't work this way. And this causes some issues. So let's take a look at what this is. Let me continue with the slide here. So Concord Pro and Altium 365 and the like, these are what you call component-centric libraries. What happens is you now do have a component file. And in the component file, you contain basically textual information, parameters, and links. So if you ever open up a component file in, say, a WordPad, if you can gain access to it, it's just text. There's no graphical information that's being stored in it. And they point to a symbol graphic file, and they point to a footprint graphic file. Now, I also throw in the simulation models in here too. We're not really going to focus on that here today, but if you did have SPICE simulation models, there would be links to these things as well. So where we struggle with this, because most of us have grown up on symbol-centric libraries, is that the symbol has effectively been demoted. It's been demoted to nothing more than a graphic. And that's really hard for a lot of people to get their heads wrapped around when they go to a product like Concord Pro or Altium 365. So let's take a look at that. What does it look like in these tools? Well, if I bring up my, here we go, let me bring this up. This is the Explorer panel. This gives us a view into the Altium 365 Pro that we have here for 9.connects. And I happen to be in a directory for capacitors. And it doesn't matter which one of these I pick over here. What you're seeing for a given component file that I have clicked on, I see its parametric information, I see its file, its footprint, and I see its symbol. Notice something in the middle. Let me expand this out a little bit. What you see in the middle over here are all the files that are linked to this component file. So what's linked to it? Well, there's a template, because I'm using the Pro version and I like using the templates. There are 3 different footprints associated with it. There's a symbol here as well. So I've got all of these here associated to this component. And even if I open up the editors, let's just do that really quickly just for grins so we can take a look at what it looks like in these products. It's going to bring it up over here, and I'm going to move this into my other screen so you can see it. All these are links. So the parametric information does belong to the component file. The name and description belong there. Even the part choice links belong to it. But when it comes to this, these are just links. These are actually separate files. So if I go back into, so just to give you an idea where they are, in my setup over here, yes, I define the components in a component folder, but my models are listed over here in symbols, and my footprints are listed over here in the footprint folder. So why is that important to know? What's the advantage of this versus this symbol-centric library? Well, if you worked in symbol-centric libraries, let me go back to that library here for a moment. So let's go back to this one here. If I wanted to create a new component, what I do is I basically click on Add. It's going to ask me for a new component. I'm just going to press OK. But now I got to give it a name. Okay? And more so, I got to give it a graphic. And so it's a very common practice. If I was going to do a resistor, for example, I'd sweep over this, and I'd do a Control-C, and I'd go over here, and I'd paste it in. I don't have to do this anymore in a component-centric library. In a component-centric library, I just need one representation, one symbol, bring this up over here, that would represent the resistor. I don't need to have a resistor drawn for every single component that I've got. And that's what's really hard for people to, let me do this so I can scroll this a little bit better here. So if I go down to my resistor, pardon me here, there's a bit of them in here. There we go. So here's my resistor, my 2-terminal resistor. That's all I need to do is refer to this graphic. So anytime I place it down, the information is told from the component. Altium says, okay, here's the component, here's the link that you're going to use. Here, I will use this symbol to represent this on the schematic. I don't have to keep redrawing it over and over again. In fact, if I do that, it makes a whole mess out of this system. And trust me, it's really hard to untangle those messes. They take days, hours to do it because it's something you've got to manually do. And in most cases, you can't always undo the tangles that you create when you do these kind of things. Okay, so the intention is not to keep recreating this resistor once I've got it available in a product like Concord Pro or Altium 365. Same goes true with the footprint. And that's what people have a hard time with. So what I'd like to do right now is I'm going to create a component for you. And then you're going to kind of see where the symbol-centricness and people who don't really understand how this is set up, where they kind of go wrong with it. What I'm going to do here is I'm first going to scroll down. I created a specific directory for this so that I can kind of keep it isolated because I don't have the luxury here of simply creating something, saving it, and then later on deleting it. I don't want to do that because it's permanent in many cases. So I prefer that I do this over here where I know I can delete it afterwards. So what I did was I created a generic folder, and underneath that generic folder, I have a component folder, I have a footprint folder, and I have a symbol folder. So notice something about this, because you're going to see this here in a moment. I got 4 symbols in here. Okay, they're all the exact same. I have a footprint folder in here, and I believe at this point I'm going to do a control. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could do that, but that was not what I intended to do. I'm going to go back over here to my footprints again, and let's try that again. Control A. There we go. I'm going to right click. I have 16 versions, or pardon me, 16 footprints in here. Okay, let me pull this down so you can see the list. And then I also have my capacitors, which I've been using. This is a directory I've been using to practice for this today. And this is where we're going to create the component. So I'm trying to keep it in this environment here. I don't want any of these files to ever propagate into our regular library here. We have hard enough time keeping that one organized. I don't need to introduce it with experiments and practice runs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component. And then let's take a further look at that. So here I go. I'm going to create the component. So let's do add component. And notice something here from the get-go. It's blank. So I purposely did not add any template to it. So if I had a component template, there could possibly be a symbol associated with it. So at least giving me a direction to go to, and also parametric information that I could follow. Now, just one quick note, if you're not going to buy Altium 365 Pro or Concord Pro, you're just going to use Altium 365, one thing you could do to get around the lack of a template is to create a component. And then once you've created that component, like let's call it a dummy component or a template component, and hopefully you'll mark it as such that it'll be obvious. Then you can right click, do operations, and you can clone that you can clone it and then change it to the way you need to do it. So there's a way to get around this. But for our purposes right now, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to run with it. So, okay, let me create a component for you. So just let you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a chemit component. It's a capacitor. And this is the spreadsheet that I'm going to be using. And then very quickly, I think I probably already lost the place where it is, but I wrote it down here just to keep this moving along. The one that I am going to be using is the 7.5 picofarad. So this is the one that I'm going to be creating it for. Okay. In fact, I'm going to spend more time in this data sheet than it'll take me to create it. And then here's the code here. And I did write this down again because I got to take this off the screen so that I can type it in front of you. So where do I start with this? Well, if I'm a user who does not believe in the whole Concord Pro Altium 365 thing, but they told me to use it anyways, and I got to get a project done, well, where am I going to start? Well, if I start putting in a name over here, I'm going to quickly find out that Altium's giving me some information. And if the more I type in, the more it finds for me, and that's pretty cool. So I'm going to start with that, 759, because that's the 7.5 pico, the 9 is the placeholder here. And I'm going to click this one over here. And sure enough, Altium comes back. Oh, come on, don't do this to me today. Let's try that one more time. Let's go to CO402 and 759. Here we go. Let's click on that. Let's bring this up. There we go. So it comes back with this cool information, and they really improved this. Last year, this was only about a year old now. In the prior versions, it was you had to be very careful with it because it would just even stomp on your template stuff. They got smarter about it, and they said, hey, look, we noticed you're missing some stuff, and there's some things that we can update for you. So what are they asking for? Well, they'll give you the name and the description, and they'll even fill in some parametric information for me. This is cool. And they're going to give me a symbol, and they're going to give me 4 footprints. Hey, that's great. Look at all the time I'm saving, right? And I'm going to get a data sheet in the mix as well. So I'm going to press OK and just say, sure, give it all to me. And it's going to fill it out here. Now it is pulling in some information because it's taking it down from Octopart, and it's putting it here into our 365. So I've got everything I need. If I'm a designer, this is great. I just created a part in what, 2 minutes? This is great. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to save this to the server. There's one other thing that I need to do over here. I'm going to click on advanced settings, and just so that I don't get an error message here when I do this. I wish they wouldn't hide the advanced settings because a lot of times it's good to look at here. This is the ID that's going to be assigned to it. This is the folder where it's going to be saved because that's where I started this component anyways. I'm not using a template. Even if I did select a template at this point, it won't stomp on what I've got. I tested that the other day. And the type over here, well, I'm going to put capacitor. So why do I put the type in there? Number one, it's going to cry at me if I don't fix that. But number two, that's how Altium does some of its searches. If you're looking for a capacitor, you type that in, then it's not going to waste its time looking at a whole bunch of other folders that have nothing to do with capacitors. So having this associated with it certainly helps with the search engines that are within Concord Pro or Altium 365. So how do I save this to the server? Let me go back over here to the projects panel. And this is just some notes for those who are new to this or looking into this. When I created this over here, it put in a placeholder in my projects panel, and it'll always do it under if you're on Altium 365, you'll see the name of your company up here with the little cloud on it. Or if you're using Concord Pro, I think you'll see a little, basically it looks like a cylinder tube that's supposed to represent a vault. So here I'm going to click and I'm going to save it. And there's three things we can do here. We can save it to server, and discard local changes. So when I save it, what's interesting about this is that it's saving it locally. Notice one of the things it doesn't do. It doesn't prompt me as to where to save it. And it does that on purpose because it doesn't want me to know where it is, because the intention is for this to be temporary. Okay? And the idea is that maybe I'm working on something and I need to look at this again tomorrow. I'm not ready to push it to the server and make use of it, but but I do still need to save it. I want to leave it up and hold up a license. So if I save it, I close Altium and I bring up Altium another time later, this will still be there, and it will continue to be there until I do one or two other things. Either I go back here and I say discard local changes, or I save it to server. In this case, I'm going to save it to the server. So now it's going to go through the procedure of actually pushing it up and making an official component. I always encourage this, so do please type in something like initial release, and then because there's a where used history that is saved. And actually, it's more of a history, not necessarily a where used history, but there's just a revision history, and those release notes become a part of that. It's always good to take a look and see what you're going to get here. Here's the name, the revision number that's going to be assigned to it, the description. I'm okay with this. I'm going to press OK. So let's push this up. And then once this is done over here, so remember, it's not just saving this file here, this component file, it's saving this symbol, and it's saving these 4 footprints too. So that's why it's taking a little bit of time to do this. And now it's done. So let me go back over here and show you the grand results within the 365 Explorer window. So, and I put the date stamp here so you can see it. So today is the 26th. So here it is. Here's my part. Pretty cool. Okay. And here's the footprints. And here is the symbol. In fact, if I do this, I always think it's weird. The symbol doesn't always update. So if you want to update something you don't see it, click on this little this button over here next to the cog on the Explorer panel, and it should update it to the 5th one. There we go. So I'm going to ask you guys a polling question. And so let's bring up that polling question here. So when you look at what I just did I do anything wrong? Did I create a wrong symbol? Did I create a wrong footprint? Are there missing parameters? Is it all wrong? Is none of it wrong? So please take a look at that. Interesting results. Okay. So the vast majority of you said missing parameters. I completely agree with that. I didn't bother putting any more parameters in there than what the part choice is willing to give me. But believe it or not, everything else I did was wrong as well. And so let's take a look at that. If you notice over here, and let me bring up something, it just dawned on me that if I select my columns, and one of the things I like to do is bring up the release date. I'm going to press OK. Here's what's interesting about this. Here's the one that got released today. After I just pushed it in the server, it created this one over here. Notice it keeps creating it. I've done this run now 4 times before today's webinar. Here's the 5th time I've done it. It has recreated this symbol 5 times. And it has dedicated this one to 5 different components. I am completely undoing the whole purpose of Concord Pro by doing this. And as a matter of fact, the names are terrible because they're not even giving me capacitor in the name. And they're all the exact same names, by the way, and the descriptions are the exact same name. So you may say, like, how did they get away with that? You can't do that in a symbol-centric library. So how did you come up with, why does it keep creating the same thing over here, the exact same names? Well, what it's allowed to do, and because this is a database system, it is allowed to have a different unique ID. So because there's different unique IDs, you're allowed to have the exact same name over and over and over again. Now, I'm not sure why Altium's not smart enough to look to see if this already existed, But this is the problem that I now have, is that later on, if I go back into my component, my capacitor over here, and I want to clean this stuff up, I'm going to have to find the corresponding symbol over here, right? And I'm going to, well, not only do I have to find the existing symbol that was this, well, this one here I fixed. That's why you can see it's different. Let's click on the new one. So let's go over here. So this one over here is the symbol. What I would have to do is have to find this. I would want to write down the symbol over here, go into this component, make the change to the appropriate symbol, and then later on delete this one. And if I can't delete this one, create what we call the bone pile. And we had a customer where this was a problem. The customer actually had all these parts. They were building parts the way I just showed you how I did it. And they had a huge pile of resistors, a huge pile of capacitors. We already had these things in our system, but we needed to consolidate them. So, but unfortunately, we couldn't delete them because they had already been used in projects. And so we basically, and that, by the way, at that time, the trash system in Altium was very different. You couldn't, when you deleted something, you permanently delete it. And if it was already associated to something in a project, you couldn't delete it at all. I think some of those rules have changed more recently. But the fact is that we couldn't delete them, so we had to create something called a bone pile. So after we went through manually, went into the component and made the change, then we would have to go back over to where this symbol was and make sure it wasn't associated to anything else, and then move it into a place where no one else could see it. Because the administrators can create folders no one else could see. And we just couldn't get them out of the system. And all we're doing, remember, every time we make a change to this, to a component, we are adding a new file in. We're bloating the system when we're doing this kind of stuff. And that's probably the unfortunate part about this, since things don't get deleted, and some of them we just can't delete, we just continue to add more and more to the system, we slow it down. Let's also take a look at something that's also important here as well. Let's take a look at this part that we have here. So this is the component that was made. I'm going to place this component down. So let me go back over here and bring this top schematic up. And if I go back into my Explorer window, and I could do this through the components panel, but since I've got this up, since I have the schematic up, if I right click on this, I can place it. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to place it. I'm just going to hit the tab key for a moment, and I'm going to just give this 1000 just so that it doesn't scream at me for having something that's already in this project. And I'm going to flip this around, and I'm just going to leave it like that, and I'm going to drop it off. So this is what happens quite often. Someone comes in, they create this thing, they took the information from Altium, and they ran with it in their project. Later on, somebody tries to come in here and cleans it up. And they say, okay, this is not right. We got to change this to the one that's from the company. So what are they going to do? They're going to go in here and they're going to say, all right, let's edit this thing. So we're going to edit this up here. Okay. And okay, well, I'm going to get rid of this because I don't want this one anymore. So I'm going to remove it. And now I'm going to go into Wizard Existing. And I'm going to go back into, let's see, this is going to be over here into my models, my symbols, and I'm going to go to my description. I just got to give it a minute to fill in the blanks over there because sometimes it takes a moment to get it all in there. There we go. And we'll go back into this and we'll go into capacitor non-polarized. This is the one I want to use. So I'm going to press OK. I'm not even going to bother with the footprints at this point, okay? But you get the idea that I want to change these things out, and that's what I would do. So I'd have to go back into projects at this point. And again, as I mentioned before, I'm not changing the old file, I'm creating a new one. So now I'm going to save it to server. And I'll say changed symbol to company standard. Press OK and get this one in there. So now this is in there. So let's take a look at our Explorer panel. And I am going to expand this out over here. So in this cog here, it shows only the latest. But really what I've done, you can see I've done this a couple of times here. So let's make sure I'm in the right one. So here's the timestamp for this. Here's the new one. Here's the old one. Okay? And by the way, I'm going to change this back to the latest because otherwise it'll trip me up a little bit later on. But I'm going to press only latest. I'm going to get this out of the way. So meanwhile, in my project, I'm moving along at a good clip. I've got a whole project done over here. And I now notice that this, when I click on this, it's saying out of date. Okay. So what I want to do here is I'm going to press this to update it, and it does update it. And the same thing over here as well. It's going to update this, but it changed the symbol, and that's really problematic for me because if my symbol is very different from the one I got from Altium, this can mess up my wiring. And if I've got a whole lot of mixed signal stuff going on, let's say mixed analog in here, I can get shorts in there. I get other things that weren't very pleasant because the nets are going to kind of wrap themselves in a very odd way. And as a matter of fact, in one customer's thing, while we were trying to help them work on this and cleaning up their stuff, one of their engineers who didn't realize that we were doing this kind of work in the background, they clicked update, said, oh my gosh, what happened over here? Because also the orientation, depending on where you are from the origin in the editor, it got pushed away, it got moved over. And so what did that individual do? He basically went into this over here and said, I got to fix this. So he went in and basically took the prior version. So he cloned the prior version and made that one the new version to fix the orientations. And so we were actually leapfrogging each other in terms of the work that we were doing. So those are the things that you're going to start coming up with when people are just allowed to just create this stuff on their own. The other two things, if I didn't mention already, notice for some reason, every time I keep bringing this down, it keeps bringing down a new symbol. Same thing's going on with the footprint as well. So if I think the last time we did a Control A and looked at the number, it was 16. It should be 20 now. So if I do a Control A here and I right click, I now have 20 things. So we're getting a lot of duplicate here. So we're bloating our database with a lot of duplicates, and we have components that are just specifically focused on specific or linking to very specific footprints where I've already got this information in Concord Pro or in Altium 365. So the bigger question is, how do we make this work? And so here are the recommendations I'm going to make. There's two major recommendations. The first one, which is the really most important one, if you need a component, look to see if the component exists. Make sure it's there, because as I mentioned, you can easily create components. I mean, if you can create symbols with the same name and footprints the same name, well, guess what? You can create components with the same name. So you want to make sure you're not already duplicating things. So you should always look for the component. Let's say the component is not there. You have an additional, let's say, responsibility, and that responsibility is for you to look for both the symbol. Is there already an existing symbol? And I guarantee if there's a discrete, like a resistor capacitor, you probably got it already. And is there existing footprints that you can use? Okay, that's the first thing you want to do, is what do you need to put together? The second thing, and this is even more important, is the order of operation in which you put it together. Yes, you can go into, in fact, I think I've got one up already. If I go over here to this Chemet part that I happen to have open, and I want to create a new footprint, all I can do is click on this and I can press on new, and it will open up the PCB editor for me to do so. And I can do the same thing with the schematic. If I remove this one here, let's go clicky, there we go, and I remove this one, I can do the same thing for the symbol. And I can say, create a new one. Well, there's an issue with this. In fact, let me just do this so I can show you what this is, and then you can see what the issue is. Okay, I created this. This is cool. So here it is. I've got this footprint. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place 2 pins just to make it a part. Believe it or not, this is a part. We've talked about this in prior webinars. That's a pretty cool part. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to close it. And I'll save it for the moment. Okay, it's being saved, but it's not being saved to server. And now it's added this in over here. One thing you may have not noticed is it does not prompt me at any point during this process about what scheme do I want to use in terms of life cycle or for revision. It doesn't ask me any of these things. So if I save this thing off, it's going to take whatever defaults are somewhere in the background. And I want control over that. So I don't recommend that you create symbols or footprints within the component editor. The first thing you want to do is you want to create your symbols or footprints. If you have to, go to the actual folder itself and create them. So let me create a symbol here. If I go to the symbol folder and I say add symbol, well, guess what's asking me for? A name, a description, an ID. If I click on the advanced, it's asking me for the revision scheme, so not the life cycle definition. It's asking for all those things in here. This should be in the component editor, and it's not. And so this is why it's important that you create the symbol, the footprint, before you create the component. Okay? So those are the two things. Make sure it doesn't exist, and if you're going to create it before you create the component. So let me now create a component with one more time with what I consider to be the proper procedure. Okay. So I am going to go into the capacitors here, and I am going to click on Add Component. Now, this particular folder is associated with a component template. And let me just show you what that component template looks like. I'm going to close this one. I don't need to save the changes on it. But this is what the component template looks like. The component template automatically establishes my life cycle, my revision scheme, my default value. So this is the incremental counter. This over here is just the fixed prefix. And this is the folder it's going to be in. These are all the parameters. And if I want to set up a symbol and a footprint, I can already predefine it. So with that being said, when I click on this and add component, let's take a look at what I get. It's not going to be blank like we saw the last time. It's already given me some information. But the cool part about this is feature that I used before, I can use it again. So let's do 0402 C 759. And we'll click on this over here. They're not happy with me today. Let's try this again. Let's do a C 402 C 759. Oh, you're not going to do it, huh? Let me give it one more. I'm going to close this one and try it one more time. Save German, do nothing. And let's give it a go here again. So if not, I'll clone it, but I'd prefer to show the regular operation. Let's go here, add component. Let's go here. Let's try this again. So this is C0402 and then C759. Let me try to go a little bit further. B, this is fine. This is the one I want. There we go. We got this one. Perfect. So now here again, it's asking me to update some stuff, and I'm okay with that. It's not going to update everything, but I'll take what it's got. It's not asking me for a symbol because I've already got one. It is asking me for some footprints, and I don't want them. And I'm more than happy to take the data sheet. So I'll press OK on this. So it is filling in some blanks. Now as for the footprint, while that's doing that over here, I'm going to bring this one up. A lot of times it's easier if you look at one that you've already got. So I'm looking at these footprints over here, and these are 0402. So these are the footprints I'd like to add in. So I'm just going to do an existing, and that's what we'll do here. I notice I'm getting a little pressed for time, so I'm just going to do one of them, and I think that should be fine. So I'm going to do existing. And even though I am looking at this on the other one, obviously you would have your Explorer up and you can take a look at it. And yeah, you can do a search for it. It's going to bring back not only your footprint, but those things that are using the footprint too. So rather than clutter it, I'm just going to bring this back here and just take in this one here just to give the idea. So I can click on this and bring it in. And from that point on, I can do existing 2 more times, bring these in. The other thing we don't want to do is just say, I'm done, because obviously I'm going to have to come back in here and change the revision in order to get the rest of the information. So I do want this. And again, this is why the Explorer panel is kind of useful, because I can look at the format that's been done for other components as well. So for the case package, this is going to be 0402. For the maximum temperature, these are, I think, 55 to 125. And notice because of the formats that they have in the template, let me jump to the template here. Not only do you have text templates, you also have Celsius text. So they're automatically filling in the units right after it. That's why these things are filling in automatically. We use SM for it, or this is the way it was set up. It's a 2-pin device. Its tolerance is 0.1. The value on this one is 25, and the voltage, the value, my bad, the value on the voltage rating is 25. The value on this one over here is, this one is a 7.5 picofarad. And there it is. So it's just as easy for me to do this correctly as for me to do it incorrectly, right? I've filled in all this stuff rather quickly. It's just knowing where the resources are. And from there, it's just a matter of going in here and saving to the server. And that's all we need to do. So if I go to save this, one other thing again, check advanced settings. Again, I wish they would leave this open by default. The template's already there, the type's already there, the ID is perfectly fine, and I can take that there. If you guys don't mind, just give me another minute, because since I'm going to save this to this, I want to make sure I get all the ones that I need. So I'm going to just bring those in. So again, I go into existing. It's going to bring up this here. I'll type this in. I don't have the luxury of. I guess I suppose I could delete it, but those things kind of get forgotten after a webinar. So, and I want to just get the. I just want to make it complete and add in our next footprint. Existing. And here we'll take this in. and this will be PCC-00086. I'll press OK. Oh, I know why this happens. I've had this happen. It's not the right one. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to go back to existing. It's because I didn't press return when I did this. So let's go back in here in PCC, and I believe I had the it was the 00088. That was the one. And there it is. I think that's the one. I'll press OK. That was the N. Sorry guys, bear with me 1 second. I want to make sure I get this right. Get this one, 55. Yeah, these look, I think they look different. I think I got all three of them. This one thing would be nice if they actually put in the code over there, but I'm going to work with what I got here, and I'm going to do save to server. So let's do that. What is that one? I did not like. Model linked, oh, multiple times. So I guess so it did pick up on that. All right, well, just to remove it here and just to move this along because my time's getting pressed, I am going to save this to server, and I'll fix that one after the webinar. So here we go. So initial release. So it did pick up on that. Was good. Check the advanced really quick, and there it is. And then that got saved into the server. So if I want to look at this in the end, the only reason I can look at it rather quickly is because I can tell which has been drafted. Plus, if I open up here and look at the date release, I can see it as well. So there they are. Okay. And I probably even still missed something, and I did over here. So I would have to go back in, which again brings back the point. Obviously, you don't want to do this when you're rushed like I am right now. I would want to go in here and fix this, and this will bump it to Rev 2. And I'm just adding another file into it. So hopefully you're kind of seeing where I'm coming with this, is that there is a right way and not a very right way to do these type of things. And the last thought I'll give you before we kind of push into questions and talk about 9. Is that you can see that this is why an administrator is necessary. And this is not just Altium's products that need an administrator. What we're seeing, whether you use RL9, which is our library system that we make available, and if someone decides to make an Excel sheet or an Access database and they put some forms in front of it, or if they just even use the classic libraries that Altium provides, in the end, everybody is got their ways of doing things. And if they're not trained on it, and if they're not cognizant of what they're doing, they're going to introduce things in which later on they may or not be able to fix. Right? Some of these things are not that hard to fix, right? I just need to add in another footprint. I need to add in a name. But if I'm using the wrong symbol, you saw what happens. If I'm using the wrong footprints, it's going to be messy later on to try to fix these things. So that's kind of where it is with that. So with that being said, I'd like to talk a few moments about 9.connects. And let's bring this over here. I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint again. And if you have some questions, I'll certainly take a look at those here. Well, you're here for a reason, right? And hopefully you've got some insight as to the issues that we've been dealing for the past year, right? You're thinking of using one of these products, you purchase one, not sure where to start, or you're knee deep in it and you're looking for ways to improve it. And well, what do we provide over here? Well, what have we been providing for the last years? We've had a lot of customers come to us and say, like, get us going on here, get our configurations moving, clean up our libraries, get them into our systems, train our guys properly, and in some cases, we need to write some documentation so that we make it company official. And these are the things that we provide for those customers. So if you need some help with it, well, we're certainly more than happy to provide that to you. And by the way, the training that we provide, other than the user training, which we just sit people down and we get them going, when it comes to setting up and the admin training, we can't be passive that way. We can't say, okay, here's a 2-hour training, best of wishes to you. It's really more of it's giving homework out. We explain, like, this is why you need to think about this, and then come back to us and tell us what you want to do. And that's kind of important there. So the training is not just 3 days of administrative training. It's really spread over a period of time so that the homework can be done and it can be done properly. So for more information, feel free to check out the 9.connects Design Services Concord Pro overview. It's the one I brought up earlier, and I'm more than happy to assist you.